Hello. So I'm doing the oral history report on my grandma. Her name is Martha Ann Connor. Her maiden name is Munn. She was born in 1950, and this is her story. So as a young child, a lot of her and her friends would play games, a lot of outside time, and as she got older, she would spend time in the community pool and going on long walks with her friends through the dirt country roads to hang out in Culver's to have their private discussions. So, growing up, she was born in Indiana. But because of job issues with her father, they ended up moving to Illinois as a small child, where she spent a little bit of time there. Then she eventually moved back to Indiana because of her grandparents and because her father had found a new job. They eventually had to move to another town called Waynetown, and that is where she spent most of her childhood and almost all of it. She moved there because they needed a house because her younger brother was born. She attended school second grade through 12th grade, the same building in Waynetown. When she eventually graduated high school, she had already met my grandfather, her future husband. He graduated the year before her and went to Washington to join the Air Force. So during the summer, she decided she did not want to live with her parents after graduation. So she went to live with his parents in Wisconsin till she had saved up enough money to go live with him. So by the end of the summer, she moves to Washington to live with him. But they did not get married until December 14th in 68. They ended up getting married on a Friday because that was their payday. That was Tom, my grandfather's payday. So they went down to the justice to immediately get married. In 1969, their first daughter, Kimberly, was born. She was about 6 months old when Tom Connor got his orders to go overseas. So Martha had to move to Indiana to live with her sister Shirley for some time until Tom could re-enlist in the military to be able to bring Martha and Kimberly over to Okinawa, Japan, where he was stationed. That is where Martha got pregnant with their second daughter, Candace. She ended up giving birth to her, and they lived there for 3 years. While they were in Okinawa, though, they had a huge typhoon. And even though the buildings were made to withstand typhoon wind speeds, there was still a lot of water that was coming into the house. So she was running back and forth with towels trying to mop up all of the water. When the Because of the fact that Tom was a weather person for the military, he was at work during the typhoon. But during the eye of the storm was shift change. So Tom was able to get home to be there to help move the towels from one side of the house to the other. So when the typhoon started again, the house wouldn't get too much damage with water. After those 3 years are up in 1972, they then moved to Baltimore, Maryland, where they got a car and Martha got her driver's license finally. After that, they moved around a lot. So they ended up going to Indiana, or excuse me, not Indiana, Illinois for 9 months so Tom could go to a college program to have a better understanding of the weather for military use. Then they moved to Nebraska, Omaha, where they were able to purchase their first house. But eventually they had to leave Nebraska and they went overseas again. This time they went to an island chain called the Azores that even though they speak Portuguese and they were found by Portugal, it took them They found America before they found these small islands called the Azores that are off the coast of Africa and the Mediterranean. They lived there from 1978 to 1980. Within those 2 years at the Azores, they had a huge earthquake. It scared them a lot because Kimberly and Candace were at a neighbor's house because they lived in a fourplex. So they were at one of the other people's place house. And also during it, Tom was sound asleep because he was working nights. So when the earthquake started, he woke up immediately and started yelling at Martha to get under a doorway. While the kids were all super smart, started running out of the house because they were so scared. Even though there was a lot of panic, the building withstood it, and everyone was okay. After 1980, they flew back from the Azores on military transport planes because that is what they gave you to travel on. And they went to Illinois again, but this time they were in a different Air Force base that was in Bellevue, that was across the river from St. Louis. So they got to see the arch a couple times, which I think sounded really cool. After that time living in Illinois, they moved to Fort Worth, Texas, which was their last move for the military purpose. They moved right before, they moved in 1985, which was right before Candace's freshman year of high school and Kimberly's junior year of high school. They lived in Texas for over 20 years. And so they both retired and moved to Goodyear, Arizona. Martha then came out of retirement for a little bit to work for a doctor's office for another 6 years or so until she officially retired. She thinks, I asked her the question, how do you think moving has affected your life? She said all the moving was amazingly enjoyable because it let her enjoy travel, but also see places she would not have been able to see or even know about if she had not been a military wife. It gave her so many unique and wonderful experiences to see the country. No. Yeah, especially with traveling overseas. It showed her how lucky she was to have the freedom to express herself as an American woman versus a woman of some other countries that she had visited. Also, being a military wife gave her the opportunity to travel. I also asked her what were some of the struggles or outcomes that came with migrating. She said not knowing or being allowed to choose where they were going to live next because of the military, but also the military would only pay for 1,500 pounds about of material that they were traveling, weight. So they had to leave a lot of stuff behind during moves because the military would not pay for it to be moved, which meant a lot of struggles for a family of four having to fit all of them under a 1,500 to all together weight limit. Um, Another struggle was the military would move them, but they always wouldn't have accommodations on base available for them. And because Tom had to go to work immediately, that meant that they had to try to find a place that was military approved housing. But also because she was a military wife, she didn't have that built-in job of being in the military, which meant she always having to start over with work and friends, especially, but also for her children. She made her worry about them because they would always be starting a new school and leaving friends and trying to make new friends. Her younger daughter, Candace, my mother, had a lot more of a challenge with being social and making new friends in her new schools. It just stemmed from her being very traditional and not liking the change that came with being a military brat, while her older sister, Kimberly, didn't really have that much of an issue because of her being so social. Overall, Martha thought her migration story definitely had an impact on her learning what it meant to be an American, especially living overseas and seeing how people live in different cultures, and how lucky we are to be Americans and to be in America with all the freedoms that people in other countries cannot afford to have. It definitely helped her have a better mindset and understanding why people want to immigrate to this country in the first place, like her ancestors did. Made her feel closer to them in the sense that she was able to understand why people from such poor conditions in their home countries would leave everything behind to come to an unknown country for different opportunities that could only be described as the freedom to dream and the freedom to have an understanding for each other, because we are a country of immigrants. It doesn't matter what anyone says. We all came here at some point in our lives. It doesn't matter what ancestor came here. We are all immigrants. And we will always be the blood of immigrants. It doesn't matter how far or how few they were. Immigration is our country. And her migration story helped her personal journey of understanding that. She is now 68 years old. No, I am sorry. She is 68 years old this year. I have the pleasure of being Martha Connor's granddaughter. It is amazing to, especially with this project, to interview my grandma and actually get her migration story. Not just the bits and pieces that I've heard over the years, but to actually sit down and have a full-on conversation about her life and how and why she had to move. And I didn't I didn't get the part of the story of how she met my grandfather, but that wasn't what this assignment was about. It was about interviewing someone and their migration story. And I think I can feel a lot closer to my grandma because of this migration story that she has of moving so much. So thank you, Martha and Tom, for letting me interview you in under being able to understand where you're coming from when you give me life advice, because you have lived it. You have lived all of it. So thank you again, Grandma. Thank you, Martha. Um, okay, bye.